Bienvenidos a todos, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Robert Carlin y estoy encargado de las relaciones internacionales acá en la Universidad de Cal State San Marcos. Well, I'm going to speak in English. I'm going to talk a little bit about the processes and the helpful tips for you, hopefully, for your graduate degree programs here in the United States. So, Sandra, if you could go to the next slide. Great. So the first thing that you really want to think about is, choosing the right program. So typically for graduate programs, there are a number of key elements for the application process. The first thing, of course, is the application itself. And those applications vary from institution to institution. I am part of the California State University system, a system of 23 campuses. Public universities in California. We're located, and we'll get into this, in just north of downtown San Diego. With the application process, typically it's the application itself, along with your statement of purpose or essay component. Sometimes a department will require what we call a resume or a CV, which is a curriculum vitae. That's basically the work that you've done either in your field or work-related experiences if you have that. You'll also most likely need a TOEFL or IELTS exam. This is to prove that you have proficiency in the English language. Other institutions now are using things like Duolingo. So look at the institutions to see what their English language requirements and proficiencies are. A number of centers and a number of locations do offer online tutorial services and help in preparing for those. Some institutions will also require what we call graduate admissions examinations. Those will vary depending on your specific area of interest. So for example, if you're looking to business schools, you're probably familiar with the GMAT. Some institutions are requiring it, others are not. The graduate record exam is for those primarily involved in the natural sciences and or the social science and humanities. And then you also have what we call the LSAT, which is the LSAT basically is for individuals who want to go on to law school. And again, check with each institution to ensure that that is one of the requirements. In addition to those elements, you also have recommendations. And recommendations could vary from 1 to 5, depending on the institution. And those oftentimes are going to be from faculty members who have actually had you in their classes and developed a rapport with. It may also be from a work experience or business experience that you may have had as well. So again, those are the 5 key elements for an application, but I did want to kind of give you an overview as to what those things are looking for. And then lastly, of course, is your financial statement. How are you going to be able to pay for your graduate studies here in the United States. So based on those elements, I want to give you some tools about helping you to narrow down your choices for choosing the right program. So the first thing is, you utilize the Education USA centers in Madrid and Barcelona because those individuals basically for free provide you with a variety of services to help you with your choices, right? They're non-biased, which means, it could be a small liberal arts college in the middle of the United States, or it could be a big research one institution on the East Coast or West Coast of the United States. They will help you narrow down some of those choices. In addition to that, they do give the workshops, as Sandra had mentioned. And so definitely look to participate in those because they will give you, like this one, give you some key information as to how to make yourself more competitive at the graduate level. There's also trusted resource guides. The Peterson's Guide, Princeton Review, for example, are 2 standardized resources for students. They kind of give you an overview of the institution, some of their requirements, the cost of attendance, et cetera. And those can be done, online now, as well as the paperback versions of that. I do caution when using Google search for selecting institutions and whatnot. There are some platforms that are pay for play. What does that mean? That means that an institution will show up fairly highly in the rankings simply because of the fact that that institution, has provided those services with a some way for them to get a higher, positioning within the platforms and whatnot. So, and Education USA can certainly help you in making sure that the resources you're Googling, for example, are in fact resources that are trusted. Rankings is another thing. Here in the United States, we don't have a common resource for rankings. US News and World Report, which is a magazine, started doing some rankings probably in the 70s to try to give parents and students some sort of benchmark as to how institutions are performing. But there are some drawbacks to that ranking system. One of those in particular is that not all institutions participate in those rankings. Some institutions that are highly selective have said, we don't like the parameters of the ranking system and therefore we're not going to participate in it. Others, in addition, have very strong master's level programs, but don't necessarily show high up in the rankings. And part of that is because of the way the rankings tools are used. In some situations, the focus is more on doctoral research institutions because those are the ones with the big grants that they're receiving from outside resources in terms of the federal government or other things. They might have a reputation, big donations because they're a doctoral research institution with, big libraries or facilities and whatnot with donors' names attached to them and whatnot. So it's very important that when you are looking in institutions, make sure that ranking is only part of the element of how you're going to be able to go ahead and consider and the appropriateness of an institution, right? Our institution, for example, is master's granting only, so we're not a doctoral research one institution. However, our teaching and professional career opportunities for our students is really quite high. And so you might look to us and say, okay, well, Cal State San Marcos doesn't really show up in the rankings, and that's because we don't necessarily fit nicely into the category of the statistics that they use for things, such as the QS rankings, the Times Higher Education rankings and whatnot, because of the way they utilize those calculations and how generally doctoral research one institutions generally tend to be higher in the rankings. Next slide. Finding the right fit, right? I always tell international students, you have a lot of choices out there. Obviously, we encourage you to consider the United States as the #1 destination for looking at institutions and whatnot. And we have a lot of universities, over 3,000 graduate level institutions in the United States. So I would start with a broader base of 10 to 15 institutions to kind of get your bearings. Look at the research that the faculty are doing and the publications that they're doing. So if you happen to be somebody who's interested in sociology, see what the faculty are doing as it relates to those things. Oftentimes faculty members on their departmental website will actually post their resume or what we call curriculum vitae in academia. And that's a good way for you to kind of sit there and say, is the work that the faculty member doing going to benefit me in terms of what I'm hoping to do upon completion of my master's or doctoral program, right? Ask specific questions to the department, what are their facilities? If you're, for example, interested in a lab type of program and whatnot, what types of facilities, laboratory access do you have? What about access to publications and written materials? Is their library extensive enough for you to be able to, write papers and do research? Reach out to the department chairs. Department chairs know their programs intimately. And so if you have specific questions related to those things, that's something you want to focus on. And what are they looking for in terms of graduate students? It doesn't hurt to ask. Even before you apply, that may be a question that you might want to reach out to them. And then if you're currently in a degree program in Spain, or anywhere in the world for that matter, have current faculty members review your essay. And Emily will be talking more specifically about what are the key elements to essay and resume writing in order to make you more competitive as far as the program is concerned. Sandra, next slide. Okay, finding the right fit, right? Allow enough time. It is so critical for especially international students. You have extra things that you have to do versus domestic student here in the United States. So I typically tell students, 9 months to a year in advance is really considered the appropriate amount of time, especially if you have to prepare for entrance exams such as the GRE or GMAT or LSAT. You have to register for an English placement approved test, etc. Know your industry. So it's not only important for you to know what the industry is like in your country, for example, like Spain, but also what the industry is like in the United States, because we'll talk a little bit about work authorizations at the completion of the program, right? Take the, test the admissions office. I encourage you to do that as well. If you do a secret shopping, fill out those inquiry forms for institutions to kind of see how responsive those institutions are at getting back to you. So those 15 institutions, it costs you nothing to fill out an inquiry form. And that's a good way for you to kind of sit there and say, oh, well, they responded to me within 2 days, or they sent me some really useful information. That's a good test for you to say that that institution is on top of their game. They're really wanting to encourage you to look at them at a little more deeper level as far as their programs are concerned. Take the campus tour. Nothing worse than you picking an institution, finding out, I thought this was going to be in the downtown of the city, when in fact, they're 150 miles from, a major metropolitan area. Look at the facilities themselves. Do they look worn down? Is the ambiance there nice? Do you think, I'm going to spend 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years at an institution? I know physicality isn't necessarily the only reason for looking at graduate programs, but it certainly helps in terms of comfort level for students. Talk to current students and alumni. Oftentimes through LinkedIn or through the Facebook page of the institution or Instagram account, you should be able to connect with current students. At my institution, we have a live chat with our admissions coordinators who can then put you in touch with students in the program. And we'll talk a little bit about a cheat sheet, which I think is helpful for you to kind of narrow down those choices. Sandra, next slide. So this is the cheat sheet. So for example, career opportunities, the cost, the academics, the school culture, is there a variety of students on the campus? Is it just, domestic students? Are there international students on the campus? I think if there's international students on the campus, my general take is that you're going to have an international office that's dedicated to international students to meet your particular needs, right? Location, and then you total up those scores with those institutions, and this might really be helpful for you in terms of narrowing down the formal application process. Next slide. Okay, I like to say don'ts and do's. I always start with the don'ts, right? Or the do's and don'ts. So do ask about scholarships. Always, as a graduate student, master's level students have fewer opportunities for scholarships, but they may have more opportunities, certainly for research opportunities. So check with the institution about the types of funding, whether it's research or scholarships that they might have that may be available to you, right? If you can, through LinkedIn, for example, is a good way to see what are alumni currently doing from that institution, particularly in your field. And LinkedIn makes that very easy for you to kind of do a search. Research the faculty, as I mentioned, get to know them, right? You're interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. Do consider your finances, obviously. You might be selected to, admitted to a very select institution, but you've spent time and energy on that, and the financial aid package just isn't sufficient enough for you to go. So it's important for you to look at that, and then obviously to look to outside scholarships as well. Get the general vibe and the responsiveness. Again, that secret shopper, as I like to say, where students go in and fill out those inquiry forms to see how quickly they respond. And then obviously do a side-by-side comparison as well. Don't ask questions about non-departmental matters to the academic departments. That's really important, right? Faculty are teachers first, or researchers first. And so getting them to answer, well, what are the dining services like? Or what about housing? That's just clogging up their inbox in their emails. So don't bother them with that. You have the admissions office's teams that are readily available to go ahead and answer those questions for you. I can't tell you how many times I'll be copied on a message to a department chair or dean, and there's 15 questions that the student's asking in one email. the departments get a bit frustrated with that simply because of the fact that they're like, well, look, I'm only here to answer questions 1 through 3, and you're going to have to answer questions 4 through 8. So be very focused in terms of what questions you're asking the academic departments, right? Don't make reputation the most important factor. Again, that ranking question, look more deeply into what the faculty are teaching, what the research is, because I think that's going to be a better fit for you at the graduate level. Culture, again, are there international students on the campus? What is what activities outside of the classroom are going to be available to you? Are there research opportunities, with local companies? Are there student associations? Are there sports facilities? Those types of things, even at the graduate level, oftentimes can help make a decision for you, right? Don't forget that, outside responsibilities. Remember, you're a student first and foremost, but you might have dependents that you're bringing along with you. You need to think about the school systems. Maybe you have a spouse that is interested in working. So you need to think about those things in addition to that. And then last but not least, I always like to say, don't ignore intuition. If it just doesn't feel right, or if there's a delay in responses and whatnot, maybe that's a sign from the institution to say, maybe they aren't quite up to snuff when it comes to connecting with students, and especially for international students. I think that's really important because you're dealing with cultural differences, time zone differences, and then obviously other obligations as it relates to your application. Next slide, Sandra. Okay, after your acceptance, remember, consider your financial aid package very carefully. Is this an ongoing scholarship or research grant that they're going to be giving you? Or is it kind of one-time thing? We'll give you $5,000 to start your program, but then, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to continue with the scholarship. Consider location, take a tour, again, physically or virtually. Many institutions such as mine, you can now literally take a walking tour of the physical campus and whatnot. Make sure you meet your application deadlines. Connect with those fellow admits. So you get admitted to an institution, make sure you sit there and say, hey, I'd like to chat with fellow students who are also admitted into the program. Departments, academic departments, if you give permission to use your email, oftentimes we'll go ahead and share that with other students. Begin review of course schedules, reading assignments well in advance. Oftentimes academic departments will post their schedules 3 months, 6 months in advance before the classes start. That gives you a good head start as to what the courses are or classes. And then also oftentimes the syllabi are attached to that in terms of reading assignments. And then of course, housing, right? I like to call it Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, right? So make sure you do that as well.